Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very honored and excited to be interviewing a very special space champion, Holly Pascal. Holly is a NASA headquarters systems engineer, where she is passionate about advancing the building blocks of humanity through the solar system. On top of that, Holly founded the Women's Aerospace Network and sits on the board of advisors for Florida Atlantic University's upcoming Center for Aerospace, Education, and Innovation. As a young leader, Holly is trying to inspire and uplift humanity and the next generation of the aerospace workforce. Furthermore, Holly is a Success Woman of Influence 2023 nominee, an author, and educator. Holly's future goals are to become an executive leader and leverage it to create an even greater positive impact on humanity. The moment I read about Holly's background and journey on LinkedIn, I immediately knew I wanted to speak with her about how she's doing so much to uplift the next generation of aerospace leaders, as well as how she navigated her own career now landing at NASA. So, welcome, Holly. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Thank you for having me. That was a very kind introduction, and I'm equally excited and inspired to be meeting with you, Gitika.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I know growing up, a lot of students dream about what it's like to work at NASA, to be, part of NASA's incredible missions. And so I have to start off by asking, what does a typical day for a NASA engineer, specifically for you, look like? And what projects are you currently working on?
So I am a systems engineer at NASA headquarters here in DC. And the work right now is hybrid, which I enjoy. So some days I go to the office, some days I don't. Specifically, I work on SCAN. So it's the communication networks for all of the NASA programs and some other non-NASA missions as well. Actually, here's one of the DSN antennas. It's absolutely massive. There's three of these things located around the world, and it helps navigate the all of the missions going on. And so a typical day, right? We have a underground parking garage at NASA headquarters, which is very convenient. And I'm working right now with just some of the most incredible, warm and kind people I've ever met in my life. And so it's something that I really value at NASA headquarters. Um, and it's a very fast-paced environment, a lot of meetings, and it's something that I really enjoy. When I went into college, I would be interviewing with jobs and they would say, okay, are you all right with being an individual collaborator? And I would say, yeah, absolutely. Because in college, they would put us in group projects, right? And group projects in college, well, my experience, as I'm sure many other can relate, was not the most enjoyable. It was rather chaotic. There was no accountability. It was, this stressful kind of thing to get to pull the project off. And so I always thought I, didn't want to work in a team. And I was like, oh, please let me just be on my own, team, do my own thing. And as I started working in my career, I realized that that was rather lonely. So when there was meetings, it was kind of the highlight of my day. We could be talking about anything. It was just like, oh, people. Um, so as my career progressed and I started to get more and more and further down the line into being an individual collaborator, days would go by without a single meeting. And I would be like, okay, maybe I'm not cut out for this. And then I started working in teams, and it was totally different than my college experience, right? It being supported, and everybody has the same mission, the same cause. You pick up where other people are busy, and you, if one person can't attend a meeting, you attend it for them. And so it's this really healthy collaboration that I wasn't exposed to in college. And I think, as you go down your career, you learn more about yourself naturally. And it's a beautiful thing seeing where you are in college and seeing how that differs out in the real world and through internships.
Yeah, I mean, what you were mentioning earlier about NASA being incredibly collaborative is really great to know. I mean, I'm a student right myself in college, and I often find myself being like, it would be really nice if I could just do this by myself and not worry about having to do with a group, but also working with a group, hearing their ideas, being able to come towards, a better solution together. I think seeing that environment being fostered at NASA is incredible. And, just being part of it is a wonderful experience, I'm sure. And apart from being a NASA engineer, you also do a lot of things outside of it, including founding the Women's Aerospace Network. And I was really intrigued by this because there are very few women in the aerospace industry to this day, which is very surprising considering how far we've come. And so I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the work that the Women's Aerospace Network does and kind of what inspired you to found it. I'm sure there was like an aha moment or something that inspired you to start this great initiative. So could you share a little bit more about it?
For sure. So another highlight of being at NASA headquarters, one thing I was really, really surprised by is the amount of women that are there, the amount of
Oh,
diversity. And so most of my team is all women. My boss is a woman, and it is just awesome to be in that environment. And I
wow.
want
Yeah.
everyone to have that environment because I was the only woman in all of my classes in college, right? I'm sure a lot of people can relate. In a lot of my other jobs and positions, I was one of the only woman, and so to have that sort of foundation bring women more into the network. And as we were actually talking about before, Gitika, is that you can be, an artist. You can go into medicine in the aerospace industry, right? And you don't necessarily have to be an engineer. And so NASA, just like any other agency, requires everyone from such diverse areas to go into aerospace. You don't need to, be a mathematician or be an engineer. There's a need for everyone. And so specifically with the Women's Aerospace Network, back in college when I was the only woman, it was kind of, I just kind of accepted it, right? That's something that going into it. But then when I was in college, specifically working on a passion project of mine, I got the opportunity to work on a cube satellite. And it was the coolest thing I thought in the entire world, right? I was walking on campus and I saw a flyer for a new student organization building a cube satellite. And I was like, what? That's a thing? We can do that? Like, let's go. And so I went to the meeting and I was fully on board. They asked me to be a team lead for the attitude, determinations, and control systems. And I said yes, 100%, without knowing that we didn't have any faculty backing. We didn't have any industry advisors working with us. We were just a bunch of undergraduate students not knowing what we were doing at all. We were just doing it. And it was the best time of my life. Not to sound nerdy, but I spent, days, weeks, months just poring over technical documents and just trying to learn everything I could about how do you build a satellite? Where do you even begin? What does that look like? How do you do attitude, determination, and controls? And one day I called my grandmother and I was so excited about this project. I just went on and on, about it. And I was expecting her to meet me with some sort of, excitement or being impressed, maybe even being proud of me, right? And instead, the only thing that I got on the line, it went dead. And she said, Holly, why don't you do something useful with your life, like become a medical doctor? And I was crushed because I just spent last 4 years of my life going for computer engineering, and she tells me to go be a doctor. And so there's um you know two problems with that statement. One, that there wasn't an understanding of the need of aerospace and in the current applications for our GPS, our weather, saving lives, TV, everything, of course. And then the words that she used weren't supportive of me, right? And a similar experience actually happened not so long ago. I've been in this position with NASA headquarters for about a month and a half. And as I was leaving my previous position with a different company, I was telling my directors and my bosses, sharing with them that I'm moving on, and I was expecting them to be, sad, of course, that I was leaving, but also excited for me and happy for my future. And I was sharing, and most were, but I was sharing it with one person in particular, and she looked at me and she said, "Wow, NASA headquarters. Are you sure you're ready for that? And I said, of course not. Who's ready for NASA headquarters? But you know what? You figure it out. And she wasn't, when she said that, she wasn't talking about me specifically. She wasn't doubting my ability to be able to do it. She was referring to her being scared, taking a leap and being able to put yourself in an environment where maybe you don't know what you're doing at first, but you have to get your grounding and you learn and you adapt and you provide value. And so those are just two instances of many where I wasn't supported like I wanted to be and needed to be. And I'm sure everyone listening to this has, similar situations. And I want to provide a women's aerospace network, right, that does provide that community, that support. So not just individuals, but also organizations. There are a ton of organizations like yours, Gitika, that are absolutely fantastic, and not nonprofits that just add so much value and awareness to people's lives and change people's lives. And in school, we hear a lot of the times, there's so many opportunities out there. There's, mentorship and there's foundations and et cetera, et cetera. But where exactly are those opportunities? Like, how do you find them? Tell me exactly where they are. And so the Women's Aerospace Network, I see that as a platform in order to connect organizations and individuals with industry leaders and industry professionals and organizations and students, and so that there can be one central platform where everyone can come to get their needs met and their wants met and be supported in however they need. So that's the vision, and it's also providing a platform for students to get their voices heard, for minorities to get their voices heard. I would love nothing more than to have as many students as I can publish articles in the magazine about their research, about their initiatives, to help them, right, to put it on their resume, to say, hey, I was featured in this women's aerospace magazine, add credibility to their names and help them get their dream job and get to where they want to be.
That's incredible. I mean, I'm just simply inspired by your drive. I could see, like, as you were describing your experiences and what you're doing to, change those situations to make women, make girls around the world feel more empowered in the aerospace industry, in the STEM sector. Is honestly, it's just showing through the screen. I can see your passion. And, you mentioned some really great points. I think a lot of students can agree we tend to put careers into boxes, like you have to become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or some sort of like boxed career, and many people don't realize that careers are so fluid and so interdisciplinary, especially in this day and age where you can cross dip multiple things together to find your niche interest and your niche career interest. And I think you kind of pointed that out, as well as how a lot of women, a lot of girls, especially in college, they notice the ratio of men to girls, the boys to girls, and they, in the workforce, it kind of carries through and they feel less confident. Or many girls have mentioned the imposter syndrome before. And to have platforms like the Women's Aerospace Network where they can see incredible women doing incredible things in the aerospace industry is going to change so many people's lives. You mentioned that your entire team is made of women, as well as your boss. I thought that was incredible. I think it goes to show how far we've come. And I think there's incredible fellowships like the Brooke Owens Fellowship that's really working towards connecting girls with women mentors, with women industry leaders. And I think the Women's Aerospace Network is going to help so many girls around the world feel empowered. So really, I think this is incredible. And I can't wait to see the first edition of the magazine being launched, as well as how far this network will go. So, I mean, thank you for sharing that. And, I also noticed that on top of everything, which I mentioned, you're an engineer as well as starting the Women's Aerospace Network, you're also a published author and an educator. And so where did that come about? Like, what books have you published, and kind of what was your motivation for doing so? I feel like a lot of people don't put engineer and author together. So the fact that you're doing that is amazing. So could you share a little bit more about your experience in publishing, your experience publishing books, as well as kind of what was the drive and purpose behind it?
Well, I have an upcoming book that's actually being released on Tuesday, so it's very exciting. And it's called The College to Dream Job Blueprint. So when I was in school, I was in clubs. I was leading clubs. I had internships under my belt. I had scholarships. I had good grades, et cetera, you name it. I thought I was an ideal candidate. And that might sound a little bit cocky, but I thought I was. And I started applying to companies and for jobs. And people started reaching out, and I got interviews and some offers, but not the jobs that I really truly wanted. The companies that, my top pick companies, my top five, none of them were reaching out to me, and they weren't jobs that were truly exciting. And I had this deep fear. It probably started around my junior year, and it was actually a conversation I would have regularly with my therapist. I was terrified that all of the work I was doing wasn't going to pay out right when I graduated. That I had this fear that I would graduate and get a good job, a decent job, and get a promotion in a few years, and then find myself in 5 years in middle management and in not really fulfilled or happy. And it was like, why do I want to do that? And so I did something that was absolutely crazy. And a lot of people did think I was crazy, and I wasn't sure if it was the best decision or the worst decision in my life, but I had a full ride for my master's, and I dropped out. It was in artificial intelligence, and I dropped out, and I spent that time honing in on the tactics and the skills needed to level up myself. And I invested in myself and my personal brand. And what happened was, as soon as I started implementing some of these skills that I developed, I started hearing back from all those top companies that originally passed me up, and I started to, get job offers and interviews. And I finally accepted, after about 6 months, I accepted one that made me so incredibly happy, that I was so honored to get, that I cried, and I cried and I screamed for not just that day, but for weeks and even months. I think it was like 5 months. I still cried every single day that I got that job. And so that is what I want for everyone, right? And so I put all of the things that I developed, all the strategies that I use, I put them in one book that's coming out on Tuesday. And so I want everyone to have that, because I want people to be able to leverage their college education in order to get jobs and make them truly excited. College is an investment, right? And a lot of people have a lot of fun in college. It's a great experience, and I want that for everyone, but I didn't have that experience. College was really, really, really tough for me. It wasn't necessarily the coursework, but it was more of like, I was a young adult. I should have been on antidepressants, and I wasn't. I was always in relationships that I just wasn't happy in. And I was, on top of that, trying to figure out how to be an adult, how to clean my dishwasher. Did you know dishwashers have filters? Just basic things like that. It's just trying to learn how to function, how to have healthy coping mechanisms. And then on top of that, it's like, oh, here is difficult coursework. And not just that, but you also have to figure out how to study, and how to work a job while you're doing that. And on top of that, it's, your whole future kind of depends on it too. So it was like this weight, this chaotic time. And I had this good family friend of mine. Many adults actually said this to me when I was in college. They would say, enjoy college while it lasts, because once you get into the real world,
Yeah, I hear that all the time.
yeah. They say, oh, enjoy college, because in the real world, you'll be in these meetings and you'll have to pay bills, and blah, 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 blah. And I wanted to slap them, because I was like, well, I'm not really having a good time. So if it gets worse when I'm out of school, what does that mean? Right. And to this day, I still want to slap them, because I'm glad that they had a great college experience. But I know a lot of people, it's very difficult. And I don't feel like sometimes, social media and society recognizes that that uphill battle that a lot of students have to face every day. It's not fun putting that investment in necessarily, and it's not fun always being broke if that's the case while you're in school. And So I want to validate a lot of college students and say that, if it is tough, that's because it is. And hopefully it is worth it. I want to help them make that worth it. There was this one example that, I was during finals, I walked into the women's bathroom, and I saw this girl who was sitting on the bathroom stall, not on the ground, and she would take Oreos off the ground and she would lick the center of them and then put it back on the ground, and she was crying. And I knocked on the bathroom stall, and I said, "Hey, like, are you okay?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And of course she wasn't fine. She was eating Oreos off the bathroom, floor. But it's like, what else can you do? And so I know that I'm not the only one who struggles in college. I had a good friend of mine who, she's in college now, and she has medical issues because of how much stress uh, college causes. And so like I said before, I just want to validate all of the students who are working hard, and, good for you, because there are a lot of people who can't handle that sort of stress. It's a very difficult thing. Um, and so that, once again, that just leads me to the reason why I made the College to Dream Job Blueprint, and the reason why I'm forming the Women's Aerospace Network is, that support system, and I want to set the next generation up for success.
Incredible. Yeah. I mean, one of the things, a common thread I noticed through like really your journey and the work you're doing is you have these experiences or you observe things like in the community or with your own personal life or your communities, your friends, and you notice a problem and you're trying to tackle that through different ways, whether it be the Women's Aerospace Network or this new blueprint that's coming out on Tuesday. I think it's incredible what you're doing to really be honest and raw about a lot of things people don't talk about. I mean, a lot of individuals, once they are past college or past their young adult life and they're kind of set in their careers, tend not to think back of how can we go back and help those students who might be going through a similar situation that I did. So, I really applaud you for doing that. I think it's going to help so many students who are having similar experiences to you to really, come out of their shell and to figure out, okay, I'm not alone. What can I do? What are the best strategies to move forward and to grow in my life? So some real world skills like, dishwashers having filters is something not everyone knows about. So I think it's amazing how not just that, but just in life in general, there'll be so many small and big pieces of advice in this blueprint. And I'm sure a lot of students and young professionals will benefit from reading it. So I'm excited to see it come out. And we haven't touched on this quite yet. You mentioned how in college you got into your CubeSats and you got really excited about space engineering and all of the technical aspects of the aerospace sector. But was that your aha moment, or did you have a different aha moment that really ignited and sparked your passion for the space industry? Like, what was a moment where you were like, I want to work in the space sector? I mean, NASA was definitely not your first destination. So, kind of what led you there? What was the aha moment for your passion for space to emerge and to begin?
So it was definitely the first time with that was the Cube satellite. The person who ran that, Jake Pierman, he is an incredible leader. He was the founder of the club, and he's still involved with them to this day. At Florida Atlantic University, they're launching a high altitude balloon, which I am so excited for. It'll be their second one, and I still work with Jake. He's also on the board for the
Wow.
upcoming Center for Aerospace and Innovation. And so that was my first run-in with space. I was like, wow, I could do this for the rest of my life. And out of school, I started working for L3 Harris Technologies, and I was working on Harris radios in Virginia. And I was lucky enough to get into the engineering leadership development program there. And they said, all right, where would you like to go? What would you like to work on? And I was looking at it, I was like, what, I want to get into weather satellites. That is where I want to be. I'm very passionate about making a positive impact on humanity, and I just love the applications that weather satellites have in order to detect upcoming threats to the environment and to humanity. And I wanted to work on them, and so I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and started working on weather satellites. And then I got the position here with NASA, and I love being at headquarters because it is, instead of being at one of one of the centers headquarters focuses on gathering all the information from the different centers. And so I'm more at a high level with systems engineering, looking at it from a bird's eye perspective instead of deep in the technical work. And so it's more of like, how do we take the technical information from the different centers and translate it up and out to the board of directors, to the bosses, administrators, to Congress? How do we take that technical information and translate the risks, translate the schedule, the budget? And it's very, I am working in a lot of different fields that I haven't been exposed to before. For example, the other day, my boss asked me to do something related to budget. And for a split second, panic. And I almost said, like, I'm an engineer. I don't know the first thing about budget, but right, you figure it out just like in college, right? You figure it out, and that's just the common theme to college, to life, to careers. I feel truly for everything.
Mentioned a really good point, which is a lot of space work that's done, especially by organizations like NASA, is to benefit life on Earth. I think there's a huge misconception that a majority of NASA's budget and employee task force is to build rockets and to send humans to the moon and Mars, and that is a huge chunk of space exploration. But a big majority of the budget really goes to trying to protect our planet, understand how our planet is evolving or possibly began, which could give us insight into its future, and to really just run basic things like satellites up that help us from different parts of the country connect. So I think it's incredible what NASA is doing and what you're doing to translate all this difficult technical information to language that everyone can understand regardless of their background. I think that's another component that we in the technical fields need to start doing more, because everybody needs to understand the work and the importance of the space industry and space exploration, because it's going to start becoming more and more prevalent in everyone's lives. So, the fact that you're working on that translation piece is going to be a huge growing opportunity and something that I think is a skill that everyone should have, engineers included, where we're able to translate all these tough technical terms into layman terms that anyone can understand. So it's wonderful. And in this journey of yours, did you have any obstacles, and how were you able to overcome them? You did mention college a little bit, but really just as a young professional, did you have an obstacle, and if so, how were you able to overcome it?
So let's see. So I think the as a young professional, I learned this lesson a couple of times. One actually fairly recently, right? And so the power of asking questions. Everyone says that it's very good to ask questions, and it is something that I do a lot, and it's great. And typically people see that as a great thing, that tests, if they're telling you something and you don't understand, you don't just nod and agree with it. You ask to clarify. And everyone that I've run into, I feel genuinely feels that way when I ask a lot of questions. But in one particular position, there was someone on my team, superior to me, who didn't view me asking questions in that way. They viewed me asking questions as in, oh, she's not as quick as the other teammate who isn't asking any of these questions. And it was very concerning to me that the teammate didn't ask any questions, right? It just kept quiet. And so the person superior to me always thought that she always knew more than me, that she was working a lot faster than I was, and even though that wasn't the case. And so I was totally panicking, right? Because it was my first job. You never want somebody a little bit superior to you viewing you in a bad light. And I would call my dad, and he would say, don't worry about it. Time will tell. You just trust in yourself. You just keep going. Don't see competition. And I was like, okay, whatever. And so I just kept being me, kept asking the questions, just try not to worry about it. And sure enough, as time did go on, things did change, and he was right, just to focus on yourself. And so in comparison, there was a similar experience I had in a recent position. There was somebody who was a kin on my team, and he was very bright and very ambitious. He was always doing projects, always innovating. And I don't see people as threats usually ever, like 99.99% of the time. But for this person, since we were in the same turf, I thought we had similar goals. I was starting to get, I don't know if insecure is the right word. I was just like, I need to keep my eye on him. I didn't feel comfortable. And so I was asking my mentors, my board of advisors, how do I handle the situation? What do I do? And they're all, saying, don't pay attention to competition. Don't worry about it. Just focus on yourself and keep going. And so those were challenges and things that I had to learn, just to really not focus on the competition as hard as that is to be, and hard as that is to do. So that's, hopefully I've learned my lesson at this point, but we'll see.
No, I think that's incredible. I think that's the perfect way, honestly, to end this interview. I think, it's so important to realize your strengths. You mentioned this. It's so easy to get caught up with, oh, this person's doing 10 things, this person's doing 20 things, oh, this person's really good at this aspect. It's so easy to get in your head and be like, oh, like I'm not good enough or I need to catch up more. But it's like, oh, you have your own strengths that are different from other individuals. You have something you can definitely bring to the table, which is why you're in that position and in that role. So focusing on yourself and your personal growth is most definitely more important than worrying about the competition, which I know can be incredibly hard in all stages of life, even as a student, as a young professional, as an industry leader. So thank you for sharing that advice. I know I will definitely take it to heart as a college student, and I'm sure everyone who's listening will as well. So throughout this interview, I had a pleasure speaking with you. You honestly had some of the best, most honest pieces of advice that I've ever heard, and I surely will carry them with me forward. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Women's Aerospace Network grow, as well as meeting you in person in DC,
Yes.
hopefully at NASA headquarters, and also reading your blueprint when it comes out. So thank you so much for doing this interview. I had an honor speaking with you today.
It was great to meet you, Gitika, and definitely hit me up for coffee when you're in the area.